Now, while I was doing that, I came across a story of this Kashmiri girl. Her name is Tajamol Islam. And Tajamol at that time was 8 years old. And she was a kickboxer. And I saw these, videos and articles where Tajamol was practicing and the father was helping her. And I was blown away with that whole idea. That's where the story started, I think. The seed was sown. Even today, you tell people that, oh, you know what, I'm growing up and I just want to be an artist or I want to be a graphic novelist. Say that. And look at the reaction of the community. Look at some of the graphic novelists or comic artists or illustrators, writers. They have to have other work to do, because they can't be full-time artists, because that's not how, it doesn't get paid well. So the problem is starting from there. It's not just changing printing more graphic novels will not change the problem. The problem will still be there. There will be more graphic novels printed, but nobody or not a lot of people will be reading it or appreciating or understanding the importance of it. It has to start from the core. Every genre is important. And there is no competition here. They can all coexist. The problem is when we start taking sides.
Hi guys, this is your host Raghav Sharma, and in this amazing episode of Discovery of an Author, we bring you a very interesting conversation around the topic of graphic novels. We sit down with Debasmita Dasgupta, who's a very acclaimed and an award-winning graphic novelist, screenwriter, and also a producer. And some of her movies are available on Netflix as well. And she's based out of UK. And in this podcast, we discussed, the overall state of the graphic novel industry in India. We discussed her latest graphic novel, which is Terminal 3. And the interesting thing about Terminal 3 is based on a girl's life who lives in Kashmir, who's a Muslim girl, who aspires to become a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion. And how she tries to, get support from her parents and community to participate in the event. A very powerful graphic novel, which actually led us to discover more about this industry, why graphic novels are not that popular in India, what is the way forward, can India ever have an industry as big as manga and Marvel, what needs to be done. So anybody who's interested in comics and graphic novel and want to know what could be done and why India is not where it could have been or should have been in this industry, I highly recommend you guys to check out this episode. Very unique topic. There are very few podcasts. I have actually not come across any podcasts where, wherein they are having a conversation around graphic novels. So this is a first of its kind podcast wherein we are touching upon the genre of graphic novels and the way ahead and how it's a massive industry in the countries where it is thriving and, growing, and what India could learn and how we can create a very strong graphic novel culture in India. And guys, please, if you like the kind of content we are creating, please like and subscribe to us. This is the only way in which we can grow. Enjoy this podcast and episode. Thank you. Debasmita, thank you so much for coming on our podcast. I welcome you. And it is truly an honor to have you with us on this podcast. And I'm really excited and looking forward to having conversations. So again, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much, Raghav. The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Same here, same here. Debasmita, you are writer, you are an illustrator, you have won a lot of awards as well, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in a bit, but I just can't control or hold myself from heaping praises on the books. Your most recent book is Zardozi, and a book that came a couple of years back by Penguin is Terminal 3. Let's start with Terminal 3, Debasmita, and I want to show the readers, the viewers, the book. This is Terminal 3, an incredible graphic novel. And I'll tell you, Debasmita, your art style is very amazing. The colors are so vibrant. It was just so pleasing to look at them. You could actually make wallpapers out of them. You can take screenshots, make wallpapers, because the colors were really amazing. The detailing was very amazing. There were certain aspects, because I don't want to tell the story, but there were certain aspects and certain scenes, the way you depicted were very mature. I was absolutely
Thank
blown
you.
away, and I really, really wish if more people discover your book. Your book is fairly popular on Amazon, but I want it to be even more popular among a lot of people. And I think if people could start their graphic novel journey with books like Terminal 3 and other books, that would be really interesting. It would be really interesting. This is a very digestible book. And what I found very interesting, and I really want to understand, and here goes my first question. Your book is based on a life of a young Kashmiri girl, Khwab. She aspires to be a sports person. And the sports that she is showing interest is Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian BJJ, as we call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this book is basically her entire journey, her connections with friends, community, some glimpses of the life in Srinagar, some certain political angles, as very certain political angles, not a major political angle, certain political angles as well. Her equation with her parents, and how she tries to pursue her career. Now, when you hear the word Kashmir, a young Muslim girl, Jiu-Jitsu, you're like, wow, these are three very different things. A Kashmiri girl called Khwab and Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She wants to, it's not cricket, it's not hockey, the sports that we are known for in India. It's not kabaddi, or it's not wrestling, or it's not javelin, apparently. But it's BJJ. And that also in a city like Srinagar, wherein it's a very turbulent, those were the turbulent times. Now I don't know what is happening. So I first want to understand, talk us through the genesis of the idea, the setting up of the entire story. How did you think about this ecosystem of this particular city and a state, of this particular woman and community, and the particular sport? So I want to first understand the genesis of this idea. How did you even think? And please, I want you to go very deep. If there are certain aspects from your own personal life that you really related, and that's how the characters were developed and born, I would really want to know. So let's go into the roots of the idea, Debasmita, for Terminal 3.
Sure. Thank you so much for that question. Um, it brings back a lot of memories. Uh, First of all, I think Kashmir to me is a very special place. And that's because when I was very young, my father, for some reason, he had a fascination for Kashmir. And when I was growing up, we used to go to Kashmir many, many times. And I had, like, friends over there. My family had connections over there, so we used to go there quite a lot. And I always, used to come back with a lot of those memories from Kashmir, because I'm from Calcutta, and Calcutta is so different from Kashmir, right? I mean, in terms of its setting. So that was one thing that always stayed with me, that I don't know, at that time, definitely I didn't know that I want to write a book. The whole thing started, the idea of Terminal 3 came to me somewhere around 2013 or 14. Now, I created a Facebook page in 2012, I think, December 2012, I think, after the Nirbhaya case. I think that was in 2012, December, if I'm not
I
wrong.
don't recollect, but could be possible.
Yes, because that was, and it was an expression from my end to create something about that whole issue. So I created this page on Facebook, because at that time Facebook pages were an in thing. It's called My Father Illustrations. The whole idea was to share stories of fathers who defend the rights of their daughters. And I I used to do a lot of research. I used to come across many, many stories from different parts of the world, fantastic stories of fathers and daughters. And my plan was just to, I used to collect those stories, illustrate them, and share them online. Now, while I was doing that, I came across a story of this Kashmiri girl. Her name is Tajamol Islam. And Tajamol at that time was 8 years old, and she was a kickboxer from Kashmir. And her father was her coach. And I saw these, videos and articles where Tajamul was practicing and the father was helping her. And I was blown away with that whole idea, like you just said, like Kashmir, kickboxing, 8-year-old
Yeah.
doesn't come together,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's where the story started, I think. The seed was sown, and I started exploring. Now, when I started doing my research, I came across so many Kashmiri sports women. They were in martial arts, they were in hockey, in football, cricket, you name it, and they were there. And, of course, they don't have the best infrastructure. Still, they do it, they pursue it with full rigor, full sincerity, and they were doing fantastic work. So this story started happening in my head at that time. So with this book, actually, that was also an intention because I discovered this and I felt like I want to share this with the world. That we don't have to look at Kashmir. Of course, the conflict, the turbulent things that you see in Kashmir happening, that is there. That will always be there. I can't just say, oh, everything is perfect. And, she's just in a metropolitan India and just pursuing sport. It's not like that. But this whole interest towards this kind of sport, this was my discovery. And I wanted to share that discovery with the rest of the world.
That is beautiful. So you discovered that people and girls specifically were playing a lot of sports, and you were very fascinated by the idea of a father helping a daughter into kickboxing. So
Yes.
so why is this idea of fathers being involved with their daughters and empowering them so fascinating to you? Is it because during your childhood your father was also very involved and very active in your life? Did he also used to push you into various activities? So where is that genesis of this fascination as well? Is the
Yes.
next level that I would want to explore with you,
Yes.
specifically
So
fathers and daughters?
absolutely, absolutely. So definitely there's a personal connection. I'm very close to my father. Uh, Also because I think whatever I do today, in the field of um, creative arts, it's all because of my father. Because when I was growing up, one thing, and I could just go on and on talking about my relationship with my father, but the most important thing is my father, he never gave me a script in life. He never said that I had to become something. He never said, oh, you have to become an engineer or a doctor. He just said, do what you love doing and you will be able to pay your bills.
Beautiful.
And don't restrict yourself. Take the risks. What's going to go wrong? If you don't take those risks, later at your life, you will regret. So take those risks. Yes, understand whenever you are taking a risk, it's your responsibility. You may win, you may not win. The winning is not so important, but participation is important. If you want to participate, participate with full sincerity, give your 100%. So this was always something that I grew up with, and I still pursue those ideas, those values. And I must also say, there is a very specific reason why I started this whole father-daughter relationships, through my father illustrations. Of course, there was the Nirbhaya case that was happening, and I wanted to show that, okay, there are two things, if you may allow me to say. So the first was when the Nirbhaya thing was happening, I was in Singapore at that time, and I was working with projects on the European Commission, and some of our projects got cancelled. These projects were supposed to happen in Delhi. And a lot of international projects got cancelled because Delhi was not considered to be a safe place. Okay. I really took it very personally. I used to live in Delhi. I have worked in Delhi, and I don't see Delhi that way. I mean, any part of the world could have those kind of situations, right? And then I started looking at the protests that were happening at that time, and there were so many men, young men specifically, who were protesting. And I felt that why are we not talking about the positive role models, because every positive story has the possibility to create another. If you just say that men are the perpetrators of violence, the ecosystem is not going to change. You also have to show the other side of the story. And right at that time, I came across this story, which is from Afghanistan. I was listening to a TED talk by this lady called Shabana Basij. And Shabana grew up during the Taliban regime in Kabul. And of course, she was, as a girl, she was not allowed to go to school. Her father, He was an Afghan man, but he was not a Taliban. And he said, you have to go to school, you have to complete your education because the Taliban's can everything except what you have here. She continued studying. She used to, in fact, go to school dressed up like a boy. She completed her studies. She went to the US, completed her master's. Now she is back in Kabul. She runs a school for other girls, other Afghan girls called Sola. And Sola means sun. And this story was such a motivation in my life. I said, I want to do something about it. And that's how my father illustrations started. And that's how I stumbled upon so many incredible father-daughter stories from across the globe.
Oh, wow. This story is so powerful. So, this is how the genesis came. This is how the idea came. Now, once you had the idea, I want to understand what next. How do you convert it? You had the idea because for this book, you are the storyteller, you are the writer, you are the artist. Everything is done by you. So, I want to understand, how does it start? Do you first start creating a story? Do you first write the story? And how does the art happen first? Does the story happen first? And my next question would be, since this entire story is based in Kashmir, that also in 2017s and 19s, and a couple of years before that as well, in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
period, I think this is pre-COVID,
Yes,
couple of years in
right.
Kashmir.
Mm.
Because it's a sensitive place, how do you also decide that what type of Kashmir do you want to showcase?
Mm. Mm.
Getting what I'm saying? What type of Kashmir do you want to showcase? What you don't want to incorporate? How do you make sure that all the characters, in terms of their look and everything, is authentic? I'm just curious. How does it
Yeah,
happen?
yeah.
How did you do the research on that location, that geography as well? So it's very fascinating because it is a sensitive state. It is a sensitive capital.
So for me, any story starts with a character. I'm a very character-driven storyteller. So to me, the character has to make sense, and in the sense that the character has to start speaking with me. When the character starts talking to me, then I know, okay, I can tell her story. So this is, and it takes a while. So I told you when I was going through this secondary research, then all of these ideas were slowly coming to me, right? And I was documenting them. So I wanted to show you this. I always see. So if this is the book, behind this book was this notebook.
I am not a bum, I'm an artist.
So this notebook is full of my notes
Wow.
for Terminal 3.
Wow.
And this started happening like, when I first got this idea, I started documenting these, all the stories and the research that I was doing. Of course, the character, like I said, to me, the character was very important when Khab came to my mind that, okay, it will be a story of Khab Nazir and Khab will be, a sports person. My first go-to place was all the contacts I had in Kashmir. So I did a lot of research for this book. I needed time to develop this story because I am not a Kashmiri. I knew it. So I didn't want to depict Kashmir in a wrong way. That
Absolutely.
is,
Yeah.
and that is so important when you're writing somebody else's story. Your ground research should be solid.
And it's
So
not a fictional state that you have created, it is an
no,
actual
no.
geography.
Yes, absolutely. And I also wanted nonfiction to seep into my fiction. So
Yes.
that nonfiction element needed to be correct. Visual research was available online, and I had, photographs from behind, I mean, from the past as well. But what I started doing was I reached out to a lot of people. So even in the book, I've mentioned some names. Some I couldn't because they didn't allow me to mention their names. But I spoke with people who are Kashmiris and they're my good friends, so that they could really share their growing up in Srinagar and how was it. There was a lot of those incidents like the bus integration that you talked about. That is a real life incident. And one of my friends shared that incident that she was in her school bus when this happened. So all those, I used to interview them, and it used to be long interviews. I used to tape all the, all the data that they were sharing with me. I interviewed journalists. I interviewed non-profit workers, like community workers who were dealing with children, specifically children and women in Kashmir and, in the neighboring states. So all those information, I started collating them. I used to also ask a lot of visual questions, like, asking a Kashmiri, like, what do you see or what do you observe when you are walking on the streets of Kashmir? Not as a tourist, right? Because as a tourist, you will only get to see the chinar trees and the Dal Lake. But as for a Kashmiri, it's very different. It's the smell of chinar. It's not the visual chinar that makes a difference. And then the colors. The color palette was actually inspired by the conversations I had with them. So I was very specific while I was doing that research, and I was talking to them that when I am showing, the visuals in this book, they will not be the traditional Kashmiri tourist version. Uh, I won't show shikaras and, lakes and beautiful mountains and trees. No, it will be the insider's story. You will see the living room, the cups, the food, the dabba, the curtains. Those were more important to me. The roadside, the Nohata chalk, all those things were more important to me to show them in the proper way. So basically, this notebook has all those information. And I must also tell you this, when I first started writing this story was not just about Khab. I had two characters. So there was Ek Khab, Ek Jannat. So my story had two characters.
Were they sisters?
No, not sisters. They were totally strangers.
Okay.
The story is Terminal 3, right? It's the Terminal 3 of the international airport, the Delhi International Airport. Yes. So my story was about Khab going out of India and Jannat coming back to Kashmir.
But they're from the same place, and
Yes.
And in this story, do they know each other?
No. The whole story was supposed to happen like parallel timelines, and these two characters are there at the same terminal, one going out of Kashmir, one coming into Kashmir. So that was my initial idea. But then, over a period of time, the story evolved, and I wanted to only concentrate on Khab's story. The last point about Jiu-Jitsu, when I was developing, I knew it very well that I want to show a particular kind of sport, and perhaps it's going to be martial arts. But I was not very sure exactly what form that would be. And I also wanted to use that particular kind of sport as a metaphor in my story. And that's when I came across an ex-colleague of mine. She's a Filipino colleague, and she is into Jiu-Jitsu. And, she was supposed to join my team. And I had never seen her before, but I heard that, this colleague who is going to be joining my team is into Jiu-Jitsu. So in my head, I had this expectation that she will be a high-built person. When she came in, she was this petite young lady. And I was like, how come you're into martial arts? And she broke the myth for me. She told me that, no, you don't have to have a high built body to become a jiu-jitsu player, because jiu-jitsu, it's like physical chess. It's all about mind game.
Mind as well.
Yes. And when you're at the bottom, you could still fight back. And I felt that is so relevant in Khav's life, right? That's such a beautiful metaphor in Khav's life.
This is one particular scene that I wanted you to explain, which I thought when I reached that location, I thought it's going to be political. That scene was when Khwab and Noor were walking in the street, or in which area, I'm forgetting the area name, but there was this
Nohata chalk.
The chalk. There was this army officer, and he was patrolling or something, and he suddenly and he says ki it is 26 January today. Something like that, right? He says ki today is 26
January is coming. Yeah.
It's coming. So I wanted to ask you, why did he say that? Did he say it to Noor and Khwab? And because I was like, what did you wanted to tell with this specific I don't know what to call it, page or specific part of the book, when the military officer says that today is 26 January, because obviously they are not the locals of that state military. They must have been some regiment.
Yeah.
And Indian military obviously is very patriotic. They are very aware of the fact that in which state and city they are. And that time, everyone was looked at from an eye of a suspicion. And it also got me thinking that how mentally pressurizing it is for girls to go to even school in such environments wherein you have these officers patrolling, which I know they're just doing their duty as well. I mean, it's something that had to be there. So I want you to explain that particular scene also. When they're walking towards school and then the officer says that today is 26 January.
Yes. I mean, I'm glad you asked that question, Raghav, because let me just show you
Yes, let's go to that part.
Yes, this is the visual that we're
Absolutely.
talking about.
And I was like, I thought now it's getting political because you have the barbed wires.
Yes. Yeah.
It's in a way, huh?
Yeah. So this is again, when I was doing my research, I was talking to Kashmiris. What I understood was that your life being guarded by wires, or you are being, checked at different posts, these are very normal for any young Kashmiri or any Kashmiri in that sense. They know that this is commonplace, this can happen anytime, at any point somebody will come. However, during the time or before 15th August or before 26th January, and we have the history tells us there has been many incidents during that time. Because of those things, there are heightened amount of security, and you see the roads are flooded with military officials. In general, also there are many checkposts, but particularly during that time, there is high security. So I wanted to just show that, how it also creates an impact. Like these two girls are just coming back from school, right? For them, it's their normal way, their normal route, going back to home. But because of those special days, suddenly things start changing. And that's why, the following lines are also that Cobb starts thinking that how all of a sudden the known becomes unknown. Like this is her road every day going back home, but during certain times of the year, it changes, or it could be a very sudden change, right? Even though you know that this happens, but somebody, that's why the military official actually tells them, oh, I mean, this is normal, right? 26th January is coming. That's why all this security that you're seeing. So again, I wanted to show it in a very common way, in a very normal way, that this is part of their life. This, I didn't want to heighten it by saying, oh, see, this is what is happening. I mean, of course, I had the power of visuals with me because I didn't have to say a lot of things. The images could already say those words for me. But that was the idea behind it.
That is very interesting because you are absolutely right. What might feel or what may feel very abnormal for the rest of us is very much normal for the people who are living in that particular area. So I really wanted to tell these people, and I deliberately got this discussion involved so that people can know that no, this is not a political book, because that is how the orientation is. That is how people think. That is how I thought about it initially. Let's come to your art now. So I now understand the genesis of the idea. We have discussed enough about the story without revealing the story, because we can't do that with the fiction book. It's very, very difficult to discuss fiction books as well. You can't talk a lot about the characters and what happens because it's important for people to know. Debasmita, your art, I have also, thank you for sharing with me Zardozi as well. The art again is very vibrant. The colors are very vibrant. Some graphic novels that I have read some are monochromatic. Some follow the manga route wherein they are completely black and white. Some follow very like there's a very famous artist called Amruta Patil. I really like her work. Amruta Patil's Kora, Adi Parva, and there's one more she has written. That's just painting. It's painting in the form of painting that she's done it. Your art is very digital art. It's digital art with vibrant colors, with amazing. I really like the eyes, the way the eyes are of the protagonist. That's really, really nice. And so I want to understand how is your art style different? Is it inspired? How did it develop? Talk a little bit about your art style. Let's try to understand, where did that come from? Have you evolved with time? Have you changed with time? Or did you stick with what was your form and you have just refined it? I want to understand that. And why are all the graphic novels that you write are so vibrant in colors, which is so pleasing? I absolutely love the vibrancy of the colors. So I want to understand that as well.
Thank you. Uh, so again, there are two sections in this question. So the first one that you're talking about is why my colors, and sometimes you see different. I mean, of course, there are many different kind of graphic novels, and every artist will do it differently, right? That's one thing. In terms of whether it's going to be monochromatic or color, it's also sometimes a publisher's decision, because printing a four-color book, which is a graphic novel, is a very expensive affair. So that is also something, sometimes when you're dealing with a publisher, they might also upfront just tell you that it's not going to be a profitable, um, business proposal. So let's go with monochromatic. Personally, I used to feel very disappointed when you see a very colorful cover and you open the book, it's all black and white. So, of course, this is something you have to also, then you have to have the support of your publisher, who'd also go all the way for you to say, okay, you know what, this works. Now, this is related to my style, and I think that has also become my voice, right? So today, when I create a book which is so colorful, a full graphic novel, a publisher can perhaps take the risk, and I'm saying this on their behalf, because they know that Debasmita's this particular artistic style works. So that's why they can take that risk. If it doesn't, then I don't think they would like to just, take that risk. Now, I like drawing eyes. I think when I started my artistic career, I always had the influence of some Bengali painters. So one very famous Bengali painter, his name is Jamini Roy.
Okay.
And if you look at Jamini Roy's paintings, he used to have this, big eyes. Something that you also get to see in the Durga
Durga Puja.
statues. Yes. You will see the Bengali Durga statues, the traditional ones, they will have this big,
Yeah.
eyes.
The
We
eyes
have
do
this,
the talking.
yes,
That's
yes. And
a
it's called,
reference for that. Yeah.
in Bengali, it's called potol chera chok, which
Acha,
means
acha.
chok is eyes, and potol
Eyes.
chera is like parwal ki jaise.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
right?
makes sense.
So I love that. So that kind of stayed. It, different things have evolved in my artistic style, but that particular thing, the definition of eyes, is something that has stayed with me. However, I do experiment. So if you look at Zardozi, I have just used dots.
Yes.
That's the first book where I've not used big eyes.
Okay.
I've used just dots. So I like to experiment, but I think those eyes are kind of my signature style. And I love using vibrant color palettes. I think my stories also come from there. Whatever I create, they have those kind of inspiration that and options for me to experiment with different vibrant colors. So I prefer using vibrant color palettes. Of course, it depends on the scope of the story. If the story, the mood of the story is something very somber, very, very, very different, very satirical, maybe I would use a different kind of a palette. But so far, the stories that I've created, they demanded the vibrant color palette. So that's why it kind of, also worked for me.
How has been the feedback for Terminal 3? I mean, I want to understand for Zardozi, for Terminal 3, for all the books, there are certain things that people say that stays with you, right? You're like, wow, this made my day. Thank you for saying that. So I just want to understand how has been the receptivity of your book, of Terminal 3, what all people have said. Is there something that your publishers also tell you, ki, yaar, this is how it has been performing? It's been going good. So I just want to understand from the business side as well, which is from the publisher and also from the reader's perspective, what kind of feedback do you get? And does that change or does that impact your next work? Getting
Yeah.
those data point, how does it also impact your next work and story and subject and topic? So these three things, the business perspective and feedback, the reader's perspective and feedback, and how does these two elements combined
Mm, mm.
effect on your mind for your next work and subject and topic and whatever, and
Yes,
publisher as well. If you want to go
yes,
to a different publisher. So I want to understand these three verticals as well.
yes. Uh, from the publisher point of view, I can tell you it has been working for me because so my first graphic novel was this, Nadia.
Nadia.
Okay. This was with Scholastic. Okay. And this was published in 2019. So I wrote the story in 2018. It's a different kind of a graphic novel. It's a crossover between a graphic novel and a picture book.
Okay.
And the story was about this 13-year-old girl who witnesses the divorce of her parents. Okay. This happened in 2019. Now, I'll tell you even the story behind this, how it happened, not the story of the book. I went to a residency, an artist residency, where I created this story, the structure of the story. Came
Hmm.
back. I was very excited. I posted a frame on Instagram saying that I have been working on something, very super excited that I finished doing it, and this is one frame. The next thing happens is I get a message on my Instagram from a Scholastic editor saying, I've been following your work, just saw this post. Would you like to share your manuscript? I shared my manuscript, and then Nadia happened. After Nadia happened, uh, I think 1 year down the line, I get an email from an editor from Penguin saying, are you working on any graphic novel ideas? And I was working on Terminal 3 at that time. I was developing it. And I say, yes, I am. And I send her the proposal, and she says, let's do this. I love it. Then Zardozi happens. Zardozi was, so it was not directly with HarperCollins. I was initially commissioned by this US based publisher. So they reach out to me and they say, we want to commission your work, a graphic novel based on this whole concept of breaking gender
Yep.
stereotypes. And
Yep.
that's how Zardozi happened.
Zardozi. Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say here is when you are doing work, uh, whether it is getting appreciated or not, it shows with the next book, right? That
Absolutely.
there is a demand. People are coming to you. And at this point, my next graphic novel is releasing in May. I'm working on a fifth graphic novel, and I'm also working on a sixth graphic novel. So that means there is a demand from people, right?
Business
From
demand is there.
publishers.
Yeah, business demand is there.
Publishers. Yes, yes. So, of course, when you are sharing interesting stories, when it is resonating with your publishers, yes, it is making sense. Now, the audience, with every book that is published, and I'm saying this based on two areas. One is the direct feedback that I get from publishers or from readers, and the other is the online reviews. Okay, now I don't go through all the reviews, that's not possible, but sometimes when I go through those reviews, I also see uh, different levels of criticism, some positive, some negative, which is also great. Sometimes you will see that when you read those reviews, uh, there could be the lack of awareness towards the genre, the graphic novel genre. That sometimes, because of that lack of awareness, people say certain things that, okay, this didn't work or that didn't work. I don't take it as a negative feedback at all, because I think one is that lack of awareness, and the second is every person who is receiving it has their own opinion, right? Which is also important for me to understand, because if everybody tells me everything is going great, everything is rosy, then there is
Yeah.
there is no challenge.
Yeah.
Who are you going to impress next?
Yeah.
Everybody's already impressed. I don't want that. Uh, but whenever I talk to people directly, they have given me important feedback, story feedback, image feedback, and I feel that they have resonated. The stories, the characters have resonated with them. Of course, sometimes they might also want something more or something less, or in a different format. That is fine. But my conversations with the readers have always been very positive, which has created positive impact on me. So
Yeah.
that's the two ends of the spectrum.
Now, Debasmita, I want to discuss this industry, and I just
Yeah.
want people to have some idea. I'm gonna throw a very straight question at you.
Mm.
Now, you have fiction books. Some people say there are a lot of articles online that read fiction books. It will expand your creativity. It will expand your horizon. You'll know how the world building happens and XYZ, XYZ, XYZ. You okay, and then you have the non-fiction books.
Mhm.
Non-fiction books are no-brainer. Non-fiction books are just telling the world. Let's say if somebody goes to the gym, they're posting their ripped photos online. Reading non-fiction is similar. They're to telling the world, look how bloody intelligent I am. Just finished reading Yuval Noah Harari's 500-pager Nexus. Now I know how geopolitics works. जैसे हम बोलते हैं ना, it's a बुद्धि प्रदर्शन. You're telling the world that how intellectual you are and how amazing you are, how well read you are. So it's vanity. Non-fiction is vanity. You have people like Bill Gates who's gonna bring out his list of 5 books. I read this book on climate change. I've read this book on AI and this and that. On Instagram, people are talking about it. So non-fiction, I understand. Fiction, again, there's a lobby. Then comes the graphic novel. Why should somebody read graphic novels?
Well, I have a very different take here.
Yeah.
That is, if you don't want to read graphic novels, don't. If you don't want to read nonfiction, don't. If you don't want to read fiction, don't. I am not here to convert you. Okay. And I think every genre is important. And there is no competition here. They can all coexist. The problem is when we start taking sides that fiction is better than nonfiction, nonfiction is better than graphic novels. No need. When you go inside a forest, you have every kind of tree there. There are tall trees, there are shrubs, there are creepers. They don't compete with each other. The tall trees don't say that, oh, you know what? I am the only one who are going to be staying here, because they know, nature knows that every tree, every kind of tree is needed for this ecosystem to thrive. So there are every kind of reader. Not everyone is going to read Moss and appreciate it like the way you did. That is fine. First of all, this whole idea of competition that, or making somebody understand, hey, I read this, so you also read it. We don't have to. I think the whole problem starts happening from there, not just with books, but with everything, right? We have these lobbies
Absolutely.
for cinema as well, for politics as well, for everything.
We were talking
I
about the
think,
lobbies in politics only, right? That this is,
yes,
you have the just set lobbies. There's no middle ground.
yes, yes. So I really believe that coexistence is far more important than competition. And I think our societies at present are built on the concept of competition. That's why we always say, I am better than somebody. You don't have to. You exist, the other person also exists. They are equally good, but you're completely different from each other. And you both are needed. So once we start telling ourselves that I'm not, like, I don't create graphic novels for those who read only nonfiction or who hates reading graphic novels. That's fine, because I know there are many people who love reading graphic novels. They will read my book, they will enjoy. I'm creating it for them. And while I'm doing that, if somebody gets converted, great. But I'm not going to be taking that responsibility on my shoulders and going out there and, changing the world. And if I may say here, there's this story. I love this story. Uh, it's uh, it's a folk tale, but it was told. It stayed with me because Kailash Satyarthi, when he
Yes.
was getting the Nobel Peace Prize in Norway, he told the story from the podium. It's a story of this little bird. So what happened was the forest is on fire. I'm sure you must have also heard this, but I just always say this story. The forest is on fire, and all the big animals are running away from the forest. Huh? Chote bade sare, sher, bhalu, cheetah, everybody are running away from the fire. And then suddenly they observe a little bird is going towards the fire. So the lion stops the bird and says,
Yeah.
"Hey, what are you doing?" And the fire says, "Oh, I'm carrying a water drop in my beak to extinguish the fire."
Yeah.
So all the animals start laughing, like, "Kya buddhu tumhare usse chote se pani se, the fire is not going to go away." So the bird says, "I'm just doing my bit."
Yeah.
That is exactly what I feel. I'm doing my bit. I am not there to extinguish the fire, but I would rather carry one droplet from my end so that I don't regret in life by saying I didn't do my bit.
The way I see it, and why I ask this question to mostly all the graphic novelists to understand, I associate the thriving and thriving graphic novel and art industry in a particular country to its level of education and how developed that country is. There are certain parameters. You're not going to discuss about why the graphic novel industry is not very big in Vietnam or Pakistan or India or Bangladesh. We know that we have more problems. Same story is being repeated for sports in India. I think recently there was somebody, a lobby, they were demanding good roads. Sorry, they were demanding cycling tracks. If we don't have cycling tracks in India and the government's like, is this really what you're bothered about? We are not able to feed people. Forget about the cycling tracks. And because of this, where India is in sports. In athleticism, we're nowhere. We're basically nowhere. Now, so like sports and arts and graphic novels and movies and cinemas, these are something which push a country's soft power image. Nowadays, this is the only kind of power that you can show off. It's not as if you're going to go to war every day. You can't do that, right? Soft power. I see Korea now coming up very powerfully in all the pop culture. Their art, their animation industry, their books, their movies, they're doing phenomenally well. I often ask myself this question: what would it take for the graphic novel industry in India to kick off really well, wherein we have our own styles or different styles, we have innovative storytelling, which is then getting adapted into various other medias and forms. I see it as a very strong business vertical, that this is a very powerful economics that we are missing out on. What, in your experience and in your humble observation, where do you think that India could do more? And by India, I'm not talking about the government.
Yeah.
As a group of people, as a group of community, how can this industry really kick off in this region?
I think, see, any industry or anything that you are seeing is the problem that you're seeing, the symptom that you're seeing, the seed is somewhere else, right? And the solutions are not going to be easy. The reason being, we are talking about changing the symptom that nobody is, enjoying graphic novel the way in other countries they are perhaps. But where does it start? It starts from the very beginning when you're going to school. In your education system, your system is telling you that graphic novels are considered to be comics, or art is not so important than science.
It's not a
You won't
viable.
have, yes,
Yeah.
you won't. I mean, even today, you tell people that, oh, you know what, I'm growing up and I just want to be an artist, or I want to be a graphic novelist, say that. And look at the reaction of
Yeah.
the community.
Yeah.
When I used to grow up, I mean, I remember still, I was, at least I was in Calcutta, there was a lot more
Yeah.
acceptance towards
Yeah.
art and artistic pursuits. But even then, the notion was, art करके क्या कर लोगे? I mean,
Absolutely.
what is the future? And
It's
if
not going
you
to feed you.
even look at some of the graphic novelists or comic artists or illustrators, writers, they have to have other work to do because they can't be full-time artists, because that's not how, it doesn't get paid well. So the problem is starting from there. It's not just changing the, printing more graphic novels will not change the problem. The problem will still be there. There will be more graphic novels printed, but nobody, or not a lot of people, will be reading it or appreciating or understanding the importance of it. It has to start from the core, from the base. If there are schools, create libraries in the schools where you have graphic novels. Show your kids that graphic novels are also important. I started graphic novels because my mother used to love graphic novels. My mother introduced me to graphic novels and comics, and she said these are important stories.
Yeah. My
I
father,
loved,
yeah, did the same to me.
yes. So, if your parents are not encouraging you, if your parents are, and I know there are many, I mean, I have conversations with, my friends, they have kids, and they also say, oh, comics nahi padhana hai bacche ko. Arey, I mean, comics is a very generic term. It has so much in it, and you don't know. So, we have to start from the base. If you really want to see the change at the top, it has to start from the base, from the
Yeah.
very bottom, from the very core of it.
Yeah.
That's where once you start developing that mindset, I mean, in terms of graphic novels, the best example is the country of France, right? They have this whole concept of bande dessinée. They're, look at their newspapers, their, magazines, their books, everywhere they appreciate bande dessinée, which is comics. They have different forms of comics and very heavily political comics, satirical comics, all sorts of comics. Because the culture is like that. How many museums, art galleries that you get to see in India where you have a free entry. Here, I mean, in the UK at least, when I go to a museum, I know it's a free entry. I can go anytime, anywhere, and get inspiration from things. Where do, I mean, do our, in India, do our parents are able to take their kids to those places where you're exposed? And India is such a fascinating country. We have so much wealth, artistic wealth, but are we really appreciating that, celebrating that? And there is money, like you said. But we have to wait for some person, to with money to tell us that. They will say, see, I have created an art gallery. Come here now. Then everybody will go. So we also have to change that followers mindset, right? And start taking some initiatives on our own. Like you said, you don't have to wait for somebody else to come and change it for you. Do it now, even at your level, whatever small level that is. You do your bit. You start changing your surroundings. You build one library, maybe in your community. And in India also, there are scores of examples of such initiatives, and I really applaud them because without those people, the changes that you're getting to see now will not have been possible. So I think we just have to find the right role models and continue doing that and continue making changes at the core.
Devsmita, now, so we have two more interesting segments remaining.
Okay.
Now that we have discussed your book, we have discussed about this ecosystem, which is very important for people to understand. We'll be taking out clips from, your take on perspective and industry and books and everything.
Sure.
Now, I want to come to the next part in which we go deep dive into your personal life and journey. Okay. Start from your childhood. Start from your childhood, your upbringing. How was it around growing up in Calcutta with your parents, your schooling, where you are, how you are, where you are. You were in Singapore for 10 years, now in UK. Why are you in UK? About your family, anything that you would want to share. We want people to connect with you. And if there are certain parts of it that you don't want to share, don't share. It's absolutely fine. There is no, if there are certain things that you don't want to go into and touch upon, that's completely up to you. But we want to understand your journey. We want to understand your life as well. We want to understand where wherever you are right now, how did you come up to be there? For the people who supported you, your personal journeys, because you have had an interesting journey of collaborating with so many international organizations and living in so many other countries, and also in India, living in Delhi, Calcutta. So let's
Yeah.
start. Yeah, Debasmita, I want to understand you and your journey and your childhood. So yeah, please.
So yes, so I mean, thank you for that question. I grew up. I mean, I was born in Calcutta. I grew up there. My parents still live in Calcutta. So Calcutta will always be my city,
Only
when
child?
somebody,
You're the
yes,
only
I'm the
child?
only child.
Yeah, same here.
Yes, yes. Um, so Calcutta was, of course, Calcutta has that kind of an environment, like what I was mentioning earlier as well. It celebrates different forms of art. You have, my father is into, he's 75, he's still into theater. Yeah, he's a theater actor, director. So, he does, I mean, I grew up, when I was growing up, I remember um, after school, the idea was ki jaldi se kuch kha ke, I have to go to see Baba's rehearsals. Or, sometimes it would be his show. So, and going to the backstage, and he would be doing his makeup, and that's what used to intrigue me. Like, oh my God, my world used to transform. So I grew up with all of that. Interestingly, my school, which thanks to my mother, she sent me to that school. It was a very interesting school at that time. It was a school that was, behind the genesis of that school were people like Satyajit Ray, Utpal Dutt, these actors and directors. They came together and they wanted to create a school where art was equally celebrated with science. And
Interesting.
we did not have exams until the fifth standard. There were no exams, and we were just allowed to be who we are. Ray used to come to our school, and because if you've seen Ray's film, some of the child actors are from my school. So my
That's brilliant.
seniors, my juniors, yeah. So yeah, so I grew up with all of that. Interestingly, I knew that I want to do something in arts, but while I was growing up, I was, I had like I was saying, my father gave me that free rein, so I could choose whatever I want to do. And I decided to study communications. I did my master's in international communications, international relations with a discipline called development communications, which means I could work with the international development agencies in the world. So I did that. Through that study, it also helped me to get exposed to different social issues. So my first job, so you mentioned about Calcutta and Delhi. I have also lived in Bangalore. I've lived in Hyderabad. I've lived in Pune, and I've worked in different parts of India. My first job was my internship was in Bangalore with a community-based organization called Voices. And we were doing community radio. This was funded by UNESCO at that time. It's called Namma Dhwani, our voice. And I was working on that. So from there, from Voices in Bangalore to coming back to Calcutta for a while, I worked on anti-human trafficking campaigns with Goal India, and there's a community organization called Shanglab. So I used to work with survivors of human trafficking, sex trafficking. I did a lot of work in the borders between India, Bangladesh, and Nepal, because a lot of human trafficking happens through those porous borders. So I have been the campaign manager. I have done a lot of work over there. I worked with police, and I worked with community organizations, sensitizing them, training them to how to work with a survivor, when they're rescued. I used to work in the shelter homes of the survivors as well. So I have had direct interactions with the survivors and how they see life and what they have gone through. Uh, from there, I came to Pune, where I worked with another organization. This was for the first time in non-formal education, and the funding used to come from some of these corporations like Forbes Marshall, IBM, all these companies. So there was also this combination between working with CSR as well as with non-formal education at the base. And there is this person called Shaheen Mistry. I don't know if you have heard of her. Shaheen is now with Teach India campaign.
Okay.
So Shaheen started this organization called Akanksha Foundation, and I used to work with them managing their communications. From Pune, I went to Delhi. Delhi, I started working with United Nations, and from Delhi to Singapore with European Commission. And slowly, from the grassroots level experiences, I started converting them to policy level experience. So then I started working with intergovernmental agencies, working with governments, working with diplomats, bringing policy level work to the forefront. Also, with lot with media, international media. So I used to be the press manager for European Commission for a very long time. When I did a lot of editors roundtable, uh, disaster reporting. These were the kind of topics that I was dealing with, and I worked across Asia and Europe at that time. So all these things, really, what you see me creating today, thanks to that journey that I had for good 10, 12 years of my life, from the villages in Andhra Pradesh or Karnataka or, West Bengal to the cities of Milan or Luxembourg. All these things came together and are very much inside me. So whether you see today the story of Terminal 3 or Zardozi, or even the future stories that I'm writing, I'm currently working on a story which is set in the Sundarbans, and
Oh,
I have done
wow.
a lot of work in the Sundarbans.
Wow.
So I think my foundation is from there. My foundation is there. So my stories are just a reflection of the things that I've experienced in life, and that's what I'm doing now. Moving to the UK was also, it was more of a personal plus professional reason. Um, in Singapore, I've lived for more than a decade. I started my film production house over there, which is called Films Positive. I did my first feature film. I'm a film producer. So I did my first feature film called Before Life, After Death,
Okay.
which was shot during COVID times,
In
actually.
Singapore?
And
This was
yes,
in Singapore when you were in
in
Singapore.
Singapore.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So I started Films Positive when, I left my job in 2017, my full-time job, and I wanted to
Okay.
become full-time into creatives. So I started, with my author illustration works, but at the same time, I was super interested in cinema. And that's how Films Positive started. We started with short fictions. One of the first features, short fiction, not feature, the fiction that I directed, not directed, I produced it's called Bin Bulai. It's actually on this platform. It's on the Hotstar, Geo
Geo
Hotstar.
Hotstar. Do send me the link as well. I would
Yes,
love to
and it's
watch
also
it.
a Royal Stag large short film.
Acha,
So,
acha, acha, acha. Royal Stag
so,
Large. Ha, ha. They used to create a lot
ha,
of science fiction short films as well. I remember.
so it is. So it was premiered at the Geo Mami Film Festival in
Oh, Mami Film
2019.
Festival. Yeah, okay, great.
Yes, so it had Ira Dubey and Nasruddin Shah.
Oh, wow. So
Yes,
you were the producer of that?
yes. I
Brilliant.
co-produced it with another, and the story is by my mother.
Brilliant, yeah.
So, yes, so we did that. And then in 2020, I shot my first feature film, which is about these Indian communities living in Singapore. And we did that film.
You directed that. You
I
directed that.
produced it.
Or
I
produced it.
produced the film.
Okay.
So I'm a film producer. I wrote the screenplay. I co-wrote the screenplay with the director, and I produced the film. It's on Netflix. You can watch it.
What's the name?
It's called Before Life, After Death.
Before Life, After Death. We'll make sure to put up the links also in the description when
Sure,
the episode goes out.
sure, sure. So it premiered at the Singapore International Film Festival in 2022, and then 2023 onwards, it's on Netflix. And after that, at the moment, I'm producing another feature film, which we shot in 2023 in the Himalayas in Himachal with Vinay Pathakji.
Oh, wow.
Uh, yes,
Wow.
and it's an adaptation of a play by Jean-Paul Sartre. So, but
Yeah, I've heard that name.
yes, so it's an adaptation of that French play, but it's completely Indianized, and we shot it in Himachal, in Tirthan. Working in the international development sector, there was a connection with cinema because I used to commission a lot of films. So if you know of Sushmit Ghosh and Rintu Thomas, who made this documentary,
Name the
which went
documentary.
the it's called, I think, Fire, Writing with Fire. The first Oscar Indian, the Oscar nomination, they were there in the Oscars. And the next
Okay.
year, I think it was Shaunak Sen who won it.
Okay.
But Sushmit and Rintu went there. They had the nomination. So, so for example, I worked with Sushmit and Rintu when I was with, my organization in Singapore. I commissioned a documentary. We did it. We did the film in two different states, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. So we did it together. So yeah, so I was working with a lot of documentary filmmakers, but I was more of a producer material because I was commissioning the work. So that interest was there. When I left my job, I think with writing and illustrations, it's a very personal thing. I spend all the time in my studio just creating it, right? It's a very um, solo job. I enjoy it because I enjoy those times. And like I said, I have conversations with my characters, so they don't make me feel that I'm lonely. However, I think I'm also a very people's person. So I also want to work with like teams. And filmmaking is the best kind of teamwork that you see
That is
because
very interesting. That is fabulous.
so yeah, so that's how, and I'm very specific that I want to do independent filmmaking, um, which means it's super challenging because I raise my own funds for every film that I make. I don't get any studio support for the films that
Then
I make.
how do you, I mean, it's very interesting when you said that you got Ira Dubey and Nasiruddin Shah. I mean, I'm just, wow. What powerful.
So Nasir sir, we were trying to make a feature film in India in 2019, and I was in Bombay for a while, and I wrote to Nasir sir. I texted him. I got his contact. Nasir sir's contact is actually very easily available. So I found his contact. I texted him that we are writing something, and can I just email it to you? And he said yes, do it.
Oh, wow.
And
It's very,
and
very rare for him to not be, very, to be very open about it. Yes, come on, send it.
yes, but he's such a, I mean, and I have heard it from many people that he's a very very special actor. He encourages
Of
independent
course.
filmmakers,
Of
young
course.
filmmakers.
He's a very well-read
So
man. He has a very wide.
absolutely.
I have
Ab-
actually interviewed Vivan, his son.
oh, wow, wow. So yeah, so I wrote to him, I texted him, and then I sent the script. He read it, and then I very, with a lot of praying in my heart, I texted him back like, "Sir, how is it?" And then he he said, "It's reading well," and it was like, "Oh my God, my world was moving." And then he said, "Let's meet." So we met him several times. We were trying to make that feature film happen. Unfortunately, making feature films, that was my learning period. It's very, very difficult to make a feature
But
film.
eventually it did come out, right? It premiered in Mami, you
We
were
made
saying.
a short film. We made a
Short.
short film, and that was a different subject. So at some point, we got completely frustrated that we're not able to make the feature film. I was new. I also did not know how producing works, but definitely with a lot of, again, with a lot of support from some incredible friends who were like, let's do it, let's do it. We tried. We went to every possible place to make that film happen, but somehow it didn't. And then COVID happened. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise for us because of COVID, nobody was able to travel, and we were in Singapore, and I could make the film in Singapore.
Devsmita, now the last part is the book reading. Okay.
Okay.
So you can read something from Terminal 3, whatever part you want. It's not a very big book reading, 2 minutes,
Yeah.
3 minutes, 4 minutes. You first tell the readers which page you'll be reading it from,
Okay.
and then you can read. I'll go on mute for the book reading. I go on mute so that the author can just say.
So I will start with the section. This is the ending of the first chapter of the book. So Terminal 3 is divided in three sections: the arrival, the transit, and the departure. So this is the ending of the arrival. The commotion in the chalk has receded with the dying sun, but there is something unnatural about the evening sky. It's too red, as if trying to hide a wound which is about to bleed. Khab, Noor, and Yusuf quicken their pace through the almost deserted pavement, and that's when, only 500 meters ahead of them, a minibus disintegrates. Rings of fire spread across the wounded sky. A terrified scream cuts through the sound of explosion, chased by an undistinguishable bunch of noise which start to close in. Cobb's vision is shrouded by a cold and gradually descending darkness. An acrid smell starts to choke up her nostrils. She trips and falls on the smoke-drenched pavement. Cobb faintly calls, "Noor, Noor," and then she feels an incessant movement of human shadows around her fallen body. Noor's voice saying, "Until we live happily ever after," keeps buzzing in her head. Everything seems like an illusion. She calls out one more time, "Noor," and sinks into unconsciousness. So this is the first section. Um, I want to read another section, which is the beginning of the departure chapter. It's a long chase. The gray old beast is now tired, defeated, but it's still hungry. It has tasted the flavor of scarlet human blood. Now it wants more. Nobody can stop it. So it erupts an apocalyptic violence with another ferocious roar. It finds young, innocent human flesh and pierces its canines through it. He uses all his strength to fight out, but the gray old beast crushes his head with its claws. He succumbs as blood wells up from his mouth, and the beast slowly eats his naked body. There is a quiet after the massacre. His half-eaten, abundant body lies on the street under the vacant sky, like a forgotten toy with open, dead eyes, turquoise blue eyes. And then the last one is from Transit, and this is a love letter for Noor from Yusuf. Noor, my love, it doesn't matter who I am, where I am, how I am. It doesn't matter. But it matters how much we love each other, how far we walk for that love. It doesn't matter if this weight is blue and cold like dead old human flesh, but it matters if this flesh was once alive, soft and pink. It matters if its every breath had the fragrance of love, the fragrance that I feel when your supple fingers touch my face, my body, my soul. The scent of your presence in the absence of light. It doesn't matter how many scars they make, but it matters how many seeds you sow.
Beautiful. Amazing. Very nice. Thank you. Very powerful sections, and very nicely narrated.
Thank you.
Brilliant. So, Devsmita, thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful and absolutely amazing. And thank you so much for sharing so many details about your book and the industry and your life in general.
Thank you, Raghav. I mean, I think I have told you many times now, but I would like to reinforce it one more time. This is a fantastic podcast. I loved talking to you, and the way you made me feel comfortable, and the way we talked with a lot of ease is what made a lot of difference. So thank you for doing this, and I wish you all the very best for everything that you're trying to do. I'm sure you will be able to do them. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words.